morning. You're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Danny Laurel. It's the start of a new trading day. Let's kick off with our top story. Mass evacuation efforts are underway in Batangas following the sudden eruption of Taal volcano on Thursday night. Initial data from the NDRRMC showed that nearly 1,400 individuals from at least 5 towns near the volcano have been brought to safer ground. Alert level 3 is still raised over Taal, meaning the volcano exhibited a so-called magmatic unrest. But FIVOLC says Taal may not erupt the way it did back in January 2020, saying it's now an open system, which prevents it from building too much pressure. And while we're still on the topic of disasters and natural calamities, the Asian Development Bank is urging the Philippines to boost its disaster resilience, especially against typhoons. Now, in its report called Disaster Resilience in Asia, the regional lender said the Philippines is losing an average of 1.7% of its overall economic output annually due to storms. The ADB said the impact of typhoons could hit up to 23% of the GDP each year in extreme cases. Now, for 3 decades, or from 1990 to 2020, typhoons alone may have cost the economy at least $20 billion, according to the ADB. The lender also urged the Philippines and other Asian countries to prepare for the worsening impact of natural disasters due to climate change. The Philippines, located along the so-called Pacific Ring of Fire, is amongst the most disaster-prone countries in the globe, experiencing typhoons, volcanic eruptions, flash floods, and earthquakes. Now, on to the equity space. The Philippine Stock Exchange reported that it had raised around 122.5 billion pesos from the sale of primary and secondary shares in the first half of 2021. Now, this already exceeds the total amount raised at the local bourse in full year 2020 that was at around 103 billion pesos. The PSE earlier said that it is hoping to raise at least 200 billion pesos this year. PSE President and CEO Ramon Monzon said capital raising activities continue to be robust, which is why they remain optimistic about achieving their full-year target. Now, apart from 2 IPOs, 2 follow-on offerings, 2 stock rights offerings, and 3 private placements in the first half, there was also a boost in trading activity. The daily average turnover amounted to almost 9 billion pesos during the period, marking a 22% growth year-to-date and 36% year-on-year. Monzon says the PSE still has a lot of activities lined up for the rest of the year, including a revamped market education website. Happy Friday and welcome to the second half of 2021 and some more good news to start off the day, at least for now. The Department of Health says the Philippines is now a low-risk area for COVID. You can see on my terminal here the daily case rate of the country compared to the global daily case rate. Nevertheless, this according to the DOH, the 2-week growth rate for COVID-19 cases nationwide has been declining. And Epidemiology Bureau Director Dr. Aletea de Guzman, she said current figures indicate a slowdown in infections, but the number of those getting ill is still higher compared to last year's peak. But she did mention the TWGR, that's a 2-week growth rate, is negative, and our ADAR, which is the average daily attack rate, is still at moderate risk. So the risk classification nationally is already at low risk. However, she pointed out it's the areas outside of the National Capital Region taking up the largest portion of new cases. And not so fast, because Bloomberg has reiterated an SWS survey that says 68% of Filipinos are either uncertain or still unwilling to get a vaccine. Nevertheless, the Bangko Sentral is quite confident, at least about our medium to long-term prospects. This according to Governor Diokno. He says those prospects for the Philippine economy are bright. He says they're great, and he says that this assessment is shared by other agencies abroad, the international credit rating agencies in particular, which he pointed out have projected a strong recovery for our economy in 2021 and 2022. He also mentioned that they are certain that the Philippines will continue to be viewed as a resilient, high growth potential economy, especially by the foreign investors. He mentioned that they are working on a roadmap to to support the deepening of the capital markets. Now let's open those capital markets, shall we? You can see strengthening here up by 0.25% to 6981.32. Will today be the day for us to break through that 7,000 psychological level here? Let's take a quick peek at which ones are leading the charge this morning. Bloomberry up by 1 and 4 tenths of a percent. Another Razon company, ICTSI up by 1 and 3 tenths of a percent. You've got, however, Emperador and BDO sitting out this the gains this Friday morning. Now, here to chat with us about his second half forecast, we have with us ICCP Managing Director, Mr. Manny Ocampo. Good morning, Sir Manny, and welcome back.
Hi, morning, Danny.
Sir, exciting times, at least the past few weeks for the index. We haven't necessarily broken through 7,000, but we've had a very tight band of trading, basically
Right.
within the 6,900 range. Now that certain data have been out, at least, some important data, unemployment lower than the previous month. You've got PMI in expansionary mode finally, and even the loans, the decline in loans at least easing for the time being. Tell us, is there still more room to run to break that 7,000 level?
There definitely is, Danny. I think the recovery, if you'd like, is something we've been waiting for, and I think signals seem to be there to support the beginning of what will hopefully be a sustainable recovery for for the economy and for the capital markets. Yeah.
Sir, are you afraid of this Delta variant, and even the DOH saying that okay, the Philippines is now low risk, but still there are of course cases burgeoning outside of the capital region, and with increasing or continued easing of restrictions, would this not have another surge that might possibly happen to put all of these economic figures at risk?
Yes, the surges will probably happen, but those will most likely be localized surges, if you'd like. That not widespread surges. So if we can address, I think the government and hopefully the Department of Health, etc. They've learned their lesson already on how to address, contain, and maybe contact trace. Are managing the this Delta variant, we would hopefully have experience to address that already. Now, as the economy opens up, expect some surges, particularly in destination countries outside, and that'll be outside Metro Manila. But again, those would probably be a lot more contained as far as those surges are concerned. Coming back to Metro Manila with the with the acceleration of vaccinations, I think we should be okay. You mentioned that there's still hesitancy about a lot of people wanting not wanting to get vaccinated. Maybe with the other brands of vaccines coming
Okay.
in, there may be a lot more confidence in that.
Okay, so vaccination choosiness
Sure.
possibly, and not maybe not hesitancy. Sir, Monzon of the PSE said that we have strong capital markets, but of course a lot of that was related to the Mondanisan IPO and
Right.
a
Right.
lot of the trading there. Is that something sustainable for the rest of the year and even into 2022? Will we keep needing these big issuances to sustain that? Is there still appetite and liquidity that need to be sapped?
Well, there definitely is liquidity. Now, from our count, we think that the PSE should easily come up with another 120 billion in new issues this second half, easily. If they, we, um, if they're lucky, they'll probably even hit something closer to uh, maybe 300 billion for the year in total fundraising. So that's there. I think interest rates are still low. So as long as they remain at current levels, or maybe some even a move up a little bit, people will still be looking at the equity markets. REITs alone, Danny, will bring in, again, from our count of the three REITs that have already filed with the SEC, that's about 70-75 billion in fundraising that they'll be coming up with.
Sir, are these issuances undervalued or well below what they could have actually raised in a normal market, or is this actually not a bad deal for these companies looking to raise money? Are companies sitting out the pandemic, or are they already starting to get back in? And for investors also, is this actually a cheap time to be buying into equities, or it's not necessarily that
Well,
inexpensive?
it's not necessarily cheap, but I think we'll need to look at prospects 2022 and beyond. That's what people are really buying into. And, I think as stories unfold for companies on their prospects for next year and 2023, maybe that's what people are looking forward to. Um, a growth back to, if we end the year at 72, 7,300, that gives a good base for moving forward in the coming years. Yeah.
Sir, which REITs are you excited for in particular? We've already had a couple, A REIT, Double Dragon, and then it seems that there's going to be plenty to choose from
Yeah.
by the third quarter. Leach even
Yeah.
said possibly nine in the short term. So how can we compare amongst the REITs? Is it still a matter of who doesn't have the pogos, which ones are recurring, or now that people are looking at cyclical stocks, can we start looking at retail, or residential REITs as well?
Most of the REITs coming out now, Philinvest, Robinson's Commercial, and Mega World, are pretty much still focused on, on
Mm,
office space. So you'll have their BPOs, etc. A lot of them claim not to have pogos anymore as tenants. So that's a positive development. But and a lot of them tell pretty much, they're all comparable, almost one-on-one, same types of tenants. Maybe you have different names, etc. So you're really looking at, if on a budget, I'd probably spread my
okay.
investable funds
Mm,
among different ones just to diversify the portfolio. And see, I wouldn't concentrate on one. All are good names.
okay.
So if you have limited investable funds, I'd say maybe it's a good thing to maybe diversify, and maybe put in all the different REITs. And you know I think it becomes a question of who brings in the additional
Mm,
uh, earnings accretive assets into their REITs. Pretty much what Ayala had, a REIT had done. I mean, that was, yeah, and they've been positively rewarded with an ever increasing share price on that one. So
okay.
a REIT will be the model. Everybody that copies a REIT, and it really is people copying the leader, if you'd like.
Okay, so let's see which ones put in even more accretive properties there. And sir, last question on the RCBC deal.
Sure.
How big of a surprise was this for you? In fact, a lot had been asking whether there would be new investors coming in. The Yuchenkos had said no, they're not going to be selling. And then now here we have a Japanese company, which is of course not the first Japanese big bank to
Sure.
enter the Philippines. How big of a deal is this in terms of how RCBC can be more competitive in their pivot to digital?
Yeah, I think it brings in funds into, it brings in capital into the firm. So if you'd like, the bank gets to bulletproof the balance sheet moving forward. The digital initiatives, unfortunately, Danny, banks are not big yet into, and they're not rushing back into lending, which we really hope they will. And that's really the only way, for progress or activity to kick in again, if banks start to lend. But I guess people are still reeling in from bad debts, etc. So the entry into digital initiatives, digital banks, etc., that may happen a lot sooner than later. So um, people
Sir, but
moving away
the
from the
44
traditional.
pesos price, what's your thought on that? It's now trading at 22 pesos 50 centavos. 44 pesos was offered for these new
Yeah,
shares.
it's a premium. Why? Well, the Japanese will take a long term view, so they probably believe share price will rebound to maybe higher than those levels.
And you, sir, do you believe that?
Well, if there was an opportunity to buy lower, I mean, why? I would buy lower personally.
Okay, so there might be some rationale for them, of course, to be putting in this premium if they take a long
Yeah,
term view. Thank you so much for those insights. That was, of course, Manny Ocampo, Managing Director of ICCP.
thank you.
Checking in on other headlines, we're keeping our eyes on BSP Governor Ben Diokno is welcoming legislation to weaken bank secrecy laws. However, Diokno says that such an easing is not a must to exit out of the Financial Action Task Force gray list. Diokno explains that the Philippines has already addressed technical difficulties, including the enactment of the anti-terror law and amendments to the Anti-Money Laundering Act. With this, the official believes that Congress has already done its job to help improve our standing with the FATF. Although Diokno says that the proposed amendments to the bank secrecy law primarily aim to assist the Bangko Sentral and other agencies in the fight against money laundering and terrorism financing. A House bill is pending before Congress, which seeks to allow the central bank to look into the accounts of bank officials and employees when there are sufficient grounds for fraud, subject to the approval from the Monetary Board. Now, Fitch Ratings says Land Bank's proposed merger with UCPB may affect its financial profile and profitability in the near term. Now, in a note, Fitch says UCPB's size relative to Land Bank could significantly weaken the larger bank's financial profile, as it would make up about 14% of Land Bank's assets. For instance, Fitch says Land Bank's non-performing loans ratio could rise by 2 percentage points once UCPB's 22 billion pesos sour debt is integrated into its portfolio, but Fitch also notes that the government support will likely serve as a safety net for the state-run lender. And that's a first look into the business day. Today is Friday, July 2nd, 2021. Business World Live for the market closes at 3:15 p.m. today. I'm Danny Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe. Philippines, we are One News.